Shamed you into pudding. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen. We're jumping into chapter 4, and a couple quick things. Let me go back over here. I know I have a lot of windows. Don't judge me. So the chapter 3, the Miranda. So if you missed class, because we had a few people who missed class, no matter what, go ahead and you can still get this Miranda analysis done. You can still answer those questions. And then I will update this Miranda in class with the cases. So, and I'll put something. So if you missed class, I'll give kind of like a makeup opportunity. Okay. So I'll put, so if you were in class on Tuesday, then you're great and your credit will be coming in. But if you missed, just be sure to check back to this one because I'll put a little makeup, just a short little thing that you can do to make up. And then everyone should be able to still do this. So I know today's the first, but yeah, so if you are late, just get it submitted, okay? So hang in there. I tried something new. That Miranda project was, I think it was from the ACLU. I mean, so it wasn't one that I came up with all the way. I thought it was kind of interesting. Was it the ACLU? It was some group, but so maybe we'll try more of that. Trying new things. Okay, guys, so we're jumping into chapter 4. Get ready, get excited. What's nice about chapter 4 is it's another foundational chapter. And so there's some things that we've been kind of alluding to, wanting to talk about that now really do come forward in chapter 4. So, yay. Okay, chapter 4. Chapter 4 is officially called Law Enforcement and the Citizen on the Street. Okay. So it's partly getting again into searches and arrests, right? Which is still coming out of chapter 3. So it's important to set a little foundation here. So previously, if you encountered a law enforcement officer, police officer, encounter with law enforcement, there was just really 2 categories, right? Your encounter is either a search or it's not a search, right? There was no kind of other option. You're either, and we'll even see this a little bit later with like, you're either being arrested or you're not being arrested. Like there's no middle ground. So obviously over time, we'll see the development of something new. But do you guys know what you need legally for a search? And we've kind of talked about it in some other ways. Do you know what legally you need to have in order to effectuate a search?
You could have their consent.
Okay, so you could absolutely have their consent. That would be super important. But you don't have to have their consent. Oh yeah, Angela. Okay, I see some people. So probable cause. And you would generally show that probable cause, if I can spell it. I can't, that's fine. Shown through a warrant. However, right, a lot of times things happen on the spot, so you may not have a time to get a warrant, but you will always have to have probable cause. And I believe it was Ivan, but I'm not sure. Consent, and this is a great point, so I'm glad you said it. Consent is an exception, right, to the warrant requirement, or even, I had to think about it, if it might even be an exception to probable cause, right? Because if someone consents the search, well, then there you go. You have their permission. So, it kind of takes away that. And when you think about the framing it in the reasonable expectation of privacy or the REOP, it does kind of make sense. Like if I give you consent to search, then clearly I'm not feeling my bag is private or, because I've given consent. But great, you guys who said probable cause, PC, warrant. So we're going to jump into that kind of discussion here. Oops, let me close clear. Okay, so let's lay some foundation with some terms. And remember, this is all in your book, so you may want to look at that as well. So let's talk about some key concepts, and really what you're seeing here are 3 different evidentiary standards, okay? These are 3, they're not the only 3, but these are the 3 evidentiary standards for CJ. Okay, so there are other evidentiary standards if you go into other areas of law, great weight, more probable than not. I mean, so there are some other standards, but for criminal justice, these are really the three standards. So you have reasonable suspicion, right? And when you read these, you can also, it's like, wow, like that's kind of hard to understand. But when someone has a bare suspicion, but not necessarily believing, right? So it's a little more than belief, right? That someone has committed, is committing, or is about to commit a crime. So it's, I don't know, something more than just a belief. Like it's a little bit of a bare suspicion, you know, it's a little tiny. And we'll see that is represented by a Terry stop, which we're gonna get to. But that represents into what's known as a Terry stop. And you might have heard this referred to as a stop and frisk, right? If I can type. Okay, the next one is probable cause. And the definition here is a reasonable basis, but amounting to more than mere suspicion to believe that someone has committed a crime, is about to commit a crime, or that evidence relevant to the crime exists at a particular location, right? And probable cause is what you see with a warrant, right? So there's more facts there, okay, shown through a warrant document. And that's what you need really to do, you know, your basic Fourth Amendment requires that you have that probable cause, and then it's shown through the warrant, right? And there are exceptions, okay, to the warrant, but I don't think, yeah, I shouldn't say it that way, but yeah, there's certainly exceptions to the piece of paper. And then the final standard is one that should help you, that you should be familiar with, and that is beyond a reasonable doubt. And this is, you know, I don't know where I got this definition from, but enough proof that there is no other explanation is reasonable. So, you know, sometimes it's like, it doesn't mean that no other explanation is possible. It's not beyond all possible doubt, but it's to whatever, you know, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. To the person who's making the decision, that it is beyond all of their reasonable doubt. And I was just pulling out my giant Black's Law dictionary because you know I love it. I need to get a t-shirt. Do they sell t-shirts? I bet they do. Reasonable doubt. Ready? This is hilarious. Reasonable doubt. The doubt that prevents one from being firmly convinced of a defendant's guilt, or the belief that there is a real possibility that a defendant is not guilty. Beyond a reasonable doubt is the standard used by a jury to determine whether a criminal defendant is guilty. Whoa. It says it's probably well understood, but not easily defined. It's not mere possible doubt. It's beyond all reasonable doubt. So, I mean, these are not great definitions, you know, but there you go. So it's just beyond a reasonable doubt. Like you don't have any reasonable doubt that that happened. So obviously, when do you need this standard? You need it when you are going to find someone guilty of a crime, okay? And what's kind of interesting is you're gonna see these, besides just the Terry stop and the warrant and guilt, but you'll see these standards, these evidentiary standards coming up in other times in the procedure. Okay. So this is not necessarily to scale, and this is absolutely a drawing that you will want to be able to identify and possibly even recreate for the test or, you know, the midterm, the final type of thing. So what this represents, these are your evidentiary standards, right, that we already talked about. Okay, so I guess I could write that up here. Evidentiary standards in CJ, criminal justice. And while this is not to scale, it kind of gives you a sense of how they relate to each other. So at the very top, you have reasonable suspicion. So this is the standard you have to meet to find someone guilty of a crime, right? To prove them guilty, you'd have to have enough evidence to get to beyond a reasonable doubt, okay? But way much down further, you have probable cause, and it's almost like touching it, to be honest, but right below it, you have reasonable suspicion. So reasonable suspicion would allow you to stop and do a Terry stop, but that's not enough for a warrant, right? A search warrant or an arrest warrant. And it wouldn't give you some of the other full searches, right? You know, because sometimes you maybe have a justification for not getting the piece of paper warrant if it's an exigent circumstance or something, but you would still have to have probable cause. So probable cause is the evidentiary standard that you must meet, you know, to comply with the Fourth Amendment. Whenever you're in that REOP covered by the Fourth Amendment, then you're going to have probable cause in order to do a search. And certainly for a search warrant, arrest warrant, you've got to show probable cause. We'll also see how later, you know, things like being held to answer at the information, you know, charging someone, those will be judged on a probable cause standard. So probable cause will come up a lot. And then beyond a reasonable doubt is your classic guilt, right? So just because someone's charged with a crime doesn't mean they're going to be found guilty, partly because they're at different standards. Charged with a crime down here, finding someone guilty of a crime, evidence must be up here. So you could have a lot of people where there's enough evidence to charge them, but when it comes down to it, you know, it's up here. And by the way, I'm talking about this like I can put little beans in a thing and weigh it. It's going to be in the eye of the beholder, in the eye of the jury, in the eye of the judge, right? So we have an idea that these are stable standards, but they also are fluid, you know, because the people hearing them are different and fluid and have different experience. And that's kind of by design. Okay. Are you guys okay with this one? Drop a 2. I don't know if you're okay with me going on. So this chart just sort of, it's not drawn to scale, but it just helps you understand how these 3 standards come together. And you'll hear lots of people, especially if you watch a lot of TV show, call probable cause PC, okay? And I've never really heard reasonable suspicion called RS, but they do say PC all the time. Okay, oops, and then this one. Okay, let's go. So just a cute little animation. We'll watch this about the famous case, Terry versus Ohio. It's on my slide, it's written there. Hold on, let me make this big. Oh, and you know what, let me pause the recording. So it does not like it when I record this stuff.